Commission on Decolonizing the Russian Empire. First, warning to everyone that this event is being recorded and live streamed, so if you're not comfortable accidentally being seen on camera, that is a warning to you to maybe go outside. So I know there are a lot of good side events going on right now at the same time, so we are honored that you've come to join us. My name is Rachel Bauman. I'll be moderating the event today. I'm a policy advisor at the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, also known as the U.S. Helsinki Commission. We're an independent U.S. government agency created in 1976 to monitor and encourage compliance with the Helsinki Final Act as well as other OSCE commitments. And on that note, this event is sort of a companion event to a congressional briefing that we convened in June on this similar, same topic, essentially. This has really become a hot topic, and we were indeed encouraged by the forceful reaction to our first briefing by the likes of Kiselyov and Solovyov on Russian state TV. Of course, full of distortions and fabrications, but it tells us that the Kremlin is made very uncomfortable by this topic. So that is a nice sign. What are we really talking about here? Decolonizing the Russian Empire is about recognizing the direct relationship between Russia's plainly imperial war of conquest and genocide in Ukraine and its broader legacy of empire and colonialism in its history as well as today. And not just in Ukraine, of course, but in its occupation of Georgian territory, its illegal presence in Moldova, and its policies of coercion and repression of minority nations within its own internationally recognized borders, as well as areas which it occupies. Despite Kremlin propaganda, we do not and have never called for breaking up Russia. Our goal is to elevate repressed and marginalized voices within Russia that usually do not have a chance to be heard, and to advocate for their full rights and political and cultural representation. Some have even argued that decolonization is even the best chance for Russia to remain within its present borders, as decolonization and democratization are tightly interconnected. So we should be mindful, I think, also of the ways we in the West have been complicit in this imperial mindset by focusing on Moscow and St. Petersburg at the expense of the regions, and yes, defaulting to the Soviet model of Moscow as the capital of the entire Eurasia region. I don't think that this perspective has served us well, particularly in light of recent events and Russia's war in Ukraine. So until Russia confronts the legacy of this empire, it will continue to repress minority groups within its borders as well as threatening its neighbors, as we see today. So I look forward to learning a bit more from our panelists today, who are uniquely qualified to talk about this topic. At the end here, we have Alexei Goncharenko, who is a member of parliament in the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, a member of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, as well as vice president of the PACE Committee on Migration, Refugees, and Internally Displaced Persons. He represents Podilsk in Odessa Oblast. Dr. Maria Vyushkova is the research director at the Free Buryat Foundation, in the middle here. An ethnic Buryat from Russia, Dr. Vyushkova is also a quantum computing scientist at the University of Notre Dame's Center for Research Computing. She joined the Free Buryat Foundation after the launch of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And finally, to my left here is Leila Latipova. She's a Tatar rights activist and a reporter for the Moscow Times. Previously, she worked as a geopolitical risk analyst covering Russia, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East. She's also pursuing a postgraduate degree at the University College London, where she researches Russian regional politics and mobilization in Russia. So I just wanted to start with some remarks from each of our panelists, and then open it up to questions and discussion. So we'll start with Alexei at the end, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Helsinki Commission for this side event and very important topic, and for great opportunity to speak about what's going on now in Ukraine and in general on our continent, and the biggest threat to the world security today is Russian Empire. And it's no difference how it is called. Russian Empire, Soviet Union, Russian Federation, the spirit and the actions are absolutely the same. This is an empire which tries to colonize nations around and which destroys everything which they can. And the idea of this empire, it's very simple. I will just show you, not coming to far history, but just the last 20 years. In 2000, finally, Chechnya was suppressed, Chechen people which tried to form their own state, Ichkeria. And at that moment, unborn, that was a genocide of Chechen people, like 20% of all Chechen people were killed during the 2 Chechen wars. And that was a genocide, and not the first during 20th century. First it was during the Second World War. That was the second genocide in just 100 years. So after this, not born, unborn Chechen boys in 2000 now are fighting in Ukraine against Ukrainians and killing Ukrainians. Then in 2008, Russia, during the war against Georgia, in reality occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia. And now people from South Ossetia and Abkhazia are recruited by Russia to go to Ukraine and to kill Ukrainians in order to take Ukraine. Then in 2014, Russia attacked Ukraine. They occupied Crimea and part of Donbas. And what they did? They took almost all male population of Donbas and sent them to kill Ukrainians, their compatriots. And now they're doing the same in Crimea. And in Crimea, they mostly trying to do it with the Crimean Tatars, which is indigenous people of Crimean Peninsula. And they try to take as more Crimean Tatars to recruit them and conscript them as possible. That's what they're doing. This is the way this empire exists. So they take territory. After this, they brainwash people there. Then they take these people to go ahead, to take new territory and destroy it. Then you. Why Ukraine today? Many people are asking, why Ukraine? Why? Because it's millions of males whom they can take and to go further, to go to Poland, to Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, Romania, Georgia, and to finish their job. Well, that's what they want. That's why Ukraine. This is the idea of this empire. And sure, this is empire of evil, because all of I told you is not about developing, is not about human capital, is not about anything. It's just about taking people, killing them, going ahead. And even during this war, what they're doing, they're taking people, first of all, they started to take soldiers from the territories of Russian Federation with indigenous people like Buryatia, like Dagestan, like other parts of Caucasus region, and others. So they put in things that he's killing 2 birds with 1 shot. From one hand, he is killing young men from these nations in order that they will never raise the question about what they do, why this empire is killing them and not giving anything, why they need to be in this empire. And on the other hand, attacking another country, this case Ukraine, and in order to destroy our country and to move ahead. So, seeing this, we need to say that the only way to security of our continent is decolonization of this Russian empire and a de-imperialization of Russia. That's what we should do. Like after Second World War, that was a process of denazification of Germany. And only after this process, Germany became, and now it's a successful country, respected country, with a great economy, with a great weight in the international affairs. And the same about Russia. If they want to be any time in future normal country, they should be de-imperialized. Without this, nothing will work. So I want to tell that today, I'm sure that many people in Russia will follow our meeting today. And I want to address to people from Dagestan, from Buryatia, from Yakutia, from Chechnya, from other regions of Russia, that is the moment to stand up. That is the moment to raise up the voice. That is the moment to fight for their rights and for their freedom. I am absolutely sure about this. It was several times in history when this empire collapsed. It was with Russian Empire 100 years ago, then it was with Soviet Union 30 years ago, and now in this nearest future it will happen with Russian Federation, because Putin made a fatal mistake with the attack of Ukraine. And I want to remind you that when Russian Empire collapsed, some of the nations which were colonized, they became free. Finland, Poland, Baltic states, but for example, Ukraine, our attempt was not successful. When Soviet Union collapsed, many other nations became free, like Ukraine, like Moldova, Georgia. But for example, Chechnya, their attempt was unsuccessful. So those nations who will be active now, at the moment when this empire will collapse again, they have the chance for bright and free and prosperous future. And they should remember this. And let me finish with this. I hope this imperialistic war of this Russian Empire will be the last in their history. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexei. Dr. Vyshkova.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I am a co-founder of the Free Buryatia Foundation, Russia's first ethnic anti-war organization founded in the wake of the February 24 Russian invasion of Ukraine. First of all, I would like to thank the US Helsinki Commission for a wonderful opportunity to participate in this event. I am an ethnic Buryat. Buryats are Mongolic indigenous people in eastern Siberia. And I am also part Polish. Imperial policies of the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union are reflected in my family history. After the second partition of Poland, my Polish ancestors fought against Russian Empire in a Kościuszko rebellion and were captured and exiled to Siberia. My Polish ancestry has always been very important to me, and it has always been my dream to visit Poland, though I never expected it to happen under such sad and tragic circumstances as we face today. If you look at the map, you will discover that the Buryat part of my family is not from Buryatia. It's because of Stalin's 1937 partition of Buryat Mongolia, when the greater Buryat Mongolia was divided into 5 parts. So families of my great-grandparents ended up outside the new borders of Buryatia, outside of their homeland. Professor Marjorie Mandelstam-Balzer, an anthropologist at the Georgetown University, described this event as Stalin's gerrymandering of Buryatia, which was aimed to dilute the Buryat nation both demographically and politically. Today, Buryats are a minority everywhere they live, and they don't speak their native language, which is officially considered endangered. During Stalin's Great Purge, a lot of ethnic Buryats were killed or sent to Gulag camps, including my great-grandfather. In the 1990s, we could openly discuss this part of our history. However, the true history of Russian conquest of Siberia, including Buryatia, was never discussed, with only the peaceful and voluntary unification narrative being maintained, which Dr. Botakovska-Symbekova aptly described as the imperial innocence of Russia narrative at the previous decolonization of Russia event. Thus, the imperial mindset behind Russia's policies and expansionism has never changed, and moreover, has never been properly acknowledged. I strongly believe that this mindset in both Russian leadership and Russian society has led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And unless it is changed, Russia, unfortunately, will continue to be a threat to the world. Since March, I have been collecting the data on Russian side casualties of the invasion of Ukraine and analyzing their ethnic composition. I found out that you are 8.7 times more likely to die in this war if you are an ethnic Buryat compared to an ethnic Russian. If you are an ethnic Tuvan, 10.7 times more likely. If you are an ethnic Kazakh living in Russia, 7.5 times more likely than Russian. If you are an ethnic Chechen, you are 2.8 times more likely to die in this war. This is a result of systemic discrimination, economic inequality, and also the deployment policies and military strategy of Russian military leadership, where certain military units are considered more expendable than others. The Kremlin not only imposes disproportional burden of its illegal war on ethnic minorities with its deployment policies, the Kremlin also instigates hatred and hostility toward minorities by peddling the false narrative that it is primarily ethnic troops who are perpetrating war crimes. Unfortunately, a number of prominent Russian public figures are still spreading the narrative of Asian minorities being responsible for all war crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine, and moreover, of them constituting the majority of Russian invasion army, which is clearly not the case. On September 21st, Putin announced the so-called partial mobilization in Russia. According to the data we have collected, the proportion of those drafted to the general population is almost 4 times greater in Buryatia than in Russia in general. There is also evidence that more people are drafted from places with ethnic Buryat population compared to those with non-Buryat population. In Buryatia, this mobilization is total, it's not partial. Men and women, regardless of their age, disabilities, and number of children, are being drafted. Some of them are literally taken out of their beds at 4 o'clock in the morning and taken away. The authorities even tried to draft dead people who died during the COVID pandemic. People describe these events as Buryat apocalypse, Judgment Day, and ethnic cleansing. People are fleeing to Mongolia. There are long lines of cars at the Mongolian border. We are immensely grateful to Mongolia for letting all those people in. Thanks to this generous help under such desperate circumstances, Buryats rediscover their long-suppressed identity as a Mongolic nation. I believe that both the military aggression and terror against Ukrainians and also using Russia's minorities as cannon fodder in this unjust war stem from the same imperial colonialist mindset, which isn't properly discussed or even acknowledged, not just in Russia, but quite often outside Russia as well. And unless it changed, Russia may unfortunately continue to be a threat to Europe and to the world in general, even after a possible regime change. That's why the decolonization perspective is so important. The majority, more than 2/3 of Buryatia's population are ethnic Russians, born in Buryatia, who are, along with ethnic Buryats, also drafted to this war and are dying in this unjust war in disproportionately high numbers just because they are born in Buryatia. I would like to stress that the views expressed here are by no means anti-ethnic Russians or pro-secession. We are anti-war, anti-imperialism. We are against Russia's viciously imperial aggression in Ukraine, and we are for better and safer future for all of us. These values make it a moral obligation and a question of intellectual honesty to view the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the fate of non-Russian minorities and the future of Russia from a decolonization perspective. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Buryat, and our last panelist, Leila Lachipova.
Thank you so much. First of all, also want to thank Helsinki Commission for the opportunity to speak and to represent my people, the Tatars, and also the people of my 2 native lands, the Republic of Tatarstan and the Republic of Bashkortostan, the multinational people. I want to underline that. Now, I usually start speeches like that with this long and winded explanation of where I come from, how did it come to be that I'm a Russian citizen, but I am not Orthodox, I'm Muslim, I'm not a Slav, I'm of Turkic peoples, so on and so forth. But today is very different. For about a week now, the entire world, all the people in this room, all the people watching, no matter what kind of press you're reading, you've been seeing Russians being mobilized, you've been seeing Russians running away from mobilization wherever they can. So for me, it's different. I see my people being targeted. As my colleague just pointed out, I see ethnic minorities being disproportionately affected. At the same time, I see that in the narrative presented in the West, and that's not the West's fault in particular, we are largely erased from the picture. Now, as I said, it's not fault of the West that we are still largely unnoticed. In fact, there is only one party to blame, and that's the Kremlin, which has been systematically erasing ethnic minorities from the narrative, both outside the external narrative and the narrative within the country. Now, as all colonial erasures, it of course starts with the language. So just think about it. I'm a pure-blooded ethnic Tatar in 7th generation. I am a proud member of Tatar intelligentsia. My ancestry are Islamic clergy, teachers, people who spoke Tatar fluently. That's our native language. Just imagine my parents decide that I should not speak Tatar, that I should speak Russian, because otherwise I will have no future. So I'm just one example, and that's how Tatar language was systematically erased from every family just because you cannot use the language anywhere. You can't hire a lawyer if you just speak Tatar. You cannot survive in that country. Now, that translated into a very direct policy, particularly in the Republic of Tatarstan. In 2017, the Republic was forced to abandon lessons of Tatar language. Very clear policy decision. Now, the Kremlin also very systematically worked to rewrite our history, presenting that somehow Bashkortostan, Tatarstan voluntarily joined Russia. Well, when we, every year, the Tatars try to remind that no, we remember how in 1552 Russia conquered Kazan, and I draw your attention to this, also commemorated genocide of Tatars by erecting St. Basil's Cathedral that is right there on the Red Square. If any of you have been to Moscow, you've probably taken a picture of that. Well, that's a memoriam to genocide of my people. Russia does not talk much about that, no. So whenever we try to remind that 1552 is the year when we were colonized and destroyed, Kremlin banned the processions in Kazan, our capital. So Russians commemorate their falling soldiers that conquered Kazan. Tatars are not allowed to do a similar thing, though vastly different. Now, as all the empires, Russia has also taken away our natural resources, our land. Most of the republics do not have any right to use any revenues from that. That's a very simple, very old colonial narrative. But I also want to draw your attention how Russia very successfully re-weaponized the narrative of the war on terror to deal with minorities. Now, when Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and his organization were labeled extremist, the entire world spoke about it. There were a lot of headlines in the West. Everyone was outraged. Well, just imagine, with Muslim communities within Russia, that has been happening for years. For years, regional authorities, together with Kremlin, worked to silence any dissent within the republics by labeling anyone who disagrees with their official policies extremists. So if you are an ethnic Tatar, if you have a Quran in your house, you will be labeled an extremist. It's as easy as that. And unfortunately, because of that and because of how methodically the Kremlin was doing that and how little attention those things received in the West, there are multiple political prisoners right now from the republics, leaders of some of the most successful protest movements in Russian history, for example, the Bashkortostan Kushtau protests, who have been unlawfully jailed, who are rotting in Russian prison, and the world doesn't know their names. So just a few of them, just so you know the names, just so you've heard them. There is Ayrat Dilmuhametov, Marat Sharafuddinov, Ilnur Kinisarov, Rail Abkadirov, and Rustam Amanov. Those are just the few people in the Republic of Bashkortostan right now imprisoned and unlawfully. I want the world to know their name. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila, and thank you to all our panelists for your remarks. I'm sitting here just in awe. I guess it's very easy to be sucked in by the very simple Kremlin narratives, excluding ethnic minorities, focusing on Slavic culture, Slavic heritage. That to hear these stories from people in not just an abstract sense, but in the sense that of their own lives is really powerful. I'd like to open this up to question and answer. I thought I would throw out a question first, and then we can go around into questions from the audience. This is sort of a, abstract question, but something that I'm thinking about a lot lately. Of course, Russia is the Russian Federation on paper. Of course, real federalism does not exist under Putin. I was wondering, is autonomy of ethnic republics possible in a future Russia, or what would your vision be for a real federalism within Russia, if you think that that is possible? Anyone can take that.
I'll go ahead. I also clearly think a lot about that question as a political scientist. I think as my colleague pointed out here, we do not advocate for some mythical full breakup of Russia simply because I will speak from personal experience. So I'm an ethnic Tatar, but I grew up in the Republic of Bashkortostan, which is an extremely diverse republic. There is some, notion of a territorial dispute between Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, particularly on ethnic grounds. With Bashkortostan, the borders are not exactly clear. There are a lot of ethnic Bashkirs living, for example, in neighboring Orenburg region, etc. Of course, realistically, dividing those borders would be a very complicated task, and our experience, suggests that it's not always the best one. Now, there are very few, unfortunately, examples in the world of such diverse and huge federalist arrangements, but I guess the arrangement in the United States is the closest we have come to real federalism. In fact, a Russian constitution, if it was well followed at some point, provided a good starting framework, which also could work. I believe that instead of a full breakup, we really need to look at very, very strong federal arrangement. We need to also, most crucially, make provisions so indigenous people have, right to ownership of resources that their land has to offer. And I also will note here that we are both representatives of relatively big minorities within Russia. Well, Tatars are the second largest nationality in Russia. There are 5 million of us in Russia, plus a big diaspora community, including here in Poland. There are tiny peoples in Russia. There are communities with just about 100 people left. And when I spoke to those activists from those communities, they are quite terrified at the prospect of breakup because they say that they will be again colonized by someone else. So we also have to think about this diversity and diversity in numbers as well. Thank you.
Would you like to respond? Yeah.
So I totally agree with my colleague, and as I mentioned in my remarks, ethnic Buryats are also a minority everywhere they live, and for instance in Buryatia 70% of population are ethnic Russians, and I don't think that it is reasonable or realistic to think about a breakup. And we, as a Free Buryatia Foundation, we think that it is, well, our ideal future would be true federalism and by no means secession from Russia. But it is very important that the imperial attitude, the imperial mindset, not just in the Russian leadership, but in the Russian society should be changed. There should be no first-class and second-class citizens. Because right now, unfortunately, due to systemic discrimination and racism, ethnic minorities are literally treated as second-class citizens in Russia. And that's not just reflected in military deployment policies and selective mobilization of Buryats, which is going on right now, but also systemic discrimination on the workforce market and housing and things like that. And these problems need to be overcome, and the whole mindset needs to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. That's up to citizens of Russian Federation to decide, and I appreciate what I've heard from representatives of Russian Federation, but I would like to tell you my personal view on this. I'm not Nostradamus, but I want to tell you that one day we will discuss, and not very long time will take it, we will discuss what to do with the collapse of Russian Federation, break out of this country, and what will be, what countries will be independent, what not, how it will, and certainly it will be a very difficult process. Nobody can tell you that it will be a simple process. It will be very difficult and maybe bloody process. But I'm sorry, this is the only way, and this is the only natural process we could see. Because we can wait for something that may be changed. You know, Stalin Constitution of 1937 was also good. It was good constitution. Yeah. So you can wait for, now it was Stalin Constitution, then you have Putin Constitution, you can wait for, how it will be, who will be in the next, I don't know. Some Shmutin Constitution next, I don't know. But the result will be the same. This is empire. I just can tell you about personal story of my family. My children, on my line, my grandfather, Ukrainian from the central part of Ukraine, his family, they were called kulaki, and they were taking off their property, their mill. They tried to kill all of them. There was Holodomor. My grandfather, when he was 15 years old, he was coming every day to the school to become a worker. And he was seeing people dying from artificial famine on the sides of the road. And millions of Ukrainians were killed by artificial famine. In 20th century, just imagine this genocide, awful genocide against Ukrainians. That was a story from my grandfather from central Ukraine. And my children, grandfather, so on my wife's line, their family lived in the western Ukraine. And when Russia came there, they killed her grandfather, they took her grandmother, with the children, she had 2 children at the moment, and sent them to Baikal Lake. Just take a look on the map. And on the way, her small daughter died, and she was not allowed to bury her. They just take her body and threw it out from the train. It was 1945. That is the story of just one Ukrainian family. And we are a lucky family because I am here and my children are alive. How many lines were just finished completely once and forever? And if you, that is my piece of advice to Buryat, to Tatar people, to all others. You can wait for centuries till this empire will change, or you can go out from it and live normal, free life, prosperous life. Because before this, you can just disappear. These nations that you mentioned with 100 people in them, they also sometimes were plentiful. But now just 100 people left. Speaking about millions, I've been recently to Estonia. Estonia, the country, is 1.3 million population, just. But now there's a great country with IT sector, with everything, prosperous, with beautiful Tallinn and everything. These not big nation, they deserve the better future and they fought for it and they received it. And now they know what to do to defend themselves. So that is what I think about history and what I hear from you. Don't wait anything. That's my personal view. Again, I'm just saying what I think about it. But if Ukraine would not fight in 1991, if we would not fight now in 2022, the situation in the world and for us personally would be disastrous. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor to questions. If you could state your name and your affiliation and make sure your question is more of a question than a comment, that would be great. Start there, yes.
Right. Thank you very much. My name is Ismail Jalilov. I'm an Azerbaijani-American journalist. I'm saying this for the context of my question, so it would become more clear. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this side event because it's a very ballsy title and a very interesting subject to discuss. And I believe it required some sort of guts to do it. And I'm glad that it came from the United States, first of all. Let me direct my question to whomever would like to take it. First of all, it's fascinating to see all of the panelists here. As I said, I'm from Azerbaijan. It's the plight of the Turkic peoples of Russia is very, very sensitive and very important for us. And we follow and we try to help if we can, but diplomatically we can't do much. But you know, the people are with you, and we see you, we hear about you, and we care about you. And to Dr. Vyushkova, thank you very much for your comments. It's fascinating to see you and the gentleman from Ukraine at the same panel, because I've been reading the Ukrainian Telegram channels ever since the war started. There's a lot of anger in Ukraine with non-Russian, ethnically non-Russian populations who are accused of particular atrocities. Now, I don't believe that you can divide war atrocities by the nationality or ethnic origin of those who commit them. I believe this is all on the Russian state. I would like you to comment on that, and Mr. Goncharenko as well, to what extent this narrative holds in Ukraine, and to what extent Buryats are cognizant of the fact how they're perceived in Ukraine and the rest of the world, to be honest. And I don't expect you to be the ambassador or sort of like be held responsible for the entire people. I hope you understand where I'm coming from with this question. And secondly, Russia as the sick man of Europe. You probably remember the Ottoman Empire was referred to as the sick man of Europe when it became clear that the empire is no longer sustainable. Centrifugal forces. You spoke about tiny communities, Ms. Latipova, you spoke about tiny communities that are being wiped out by this war. Buryats, that are not a huge nation, who are probably sustaining a lot of losses in males who are conscripted. Your future, will that increase the centrifugal forces not only in Buryatia, but all other ethnic republics in Russia? How do you see your future within the Russian Federation if you're conscripted to war and you're made fight wars that you didn't start? Is the Russian government trying to solve or resolve its ethnic problem through wars by disproportionately conscripting your peoples? You've commented on that, so please, I apologize for the long and windy question, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It is a really important topic indeed. So, yes, I totally understand the anger of the Ukrainians because, unfortunately, the military units from Buryatia somehow were considered more expendable than others, and according to the date of death distribution of ethnic Buryat troops who died in this war, in the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So most of them actually were killed during the first days of the invasion, literally. So they were thrown into the meat grinder first. And when the invasion started, it was such a huge trauma for Ukrainians, and the first thing they saw were actually tank platoons where there were a lot of Asians, indeed, because it was the 5th Tank Brigade from the city of Ulan-Ude, and there are about 40% of ethnic Buryats serving in that military unit. So that's totally understandable, but unfortunately, this narrative was then promoted. Looks like it's promoted by the Kremlin itself, and unfortunately, by some prominent Russian figures who are opposed to Putin's regime. Somehow, unfortunately, they continue to spread this narrative that it's not Russians who are to blame for the war crimes. For instance, uncovered in the Ukrainian city of Bucha, Kiev region, but it is ethnic minorities who are to blame. However, we, in collaboration with the investigative organization conflict intelligence team, have established that actually military units from Buryatia were not used for occupation, particularly of the city of Bucha. And there are only a handful, literally, of ethnic Buryats in the 64 Motor Rifle Brigade, which was actually used for occupation of that city. So it's not the case for, speaking specifically about the city of Bucha, it's not the case that ethnic Buryats are responsible, and we have established that it's actually 76 air assault division from the city of Pskov, which is not an ethnic minority unit by any means. And Buryats are also a minority everywhere they serve in the military, and therefore there are no mono-ethnic military units consisting of just Buryats. And regarding the second part of your question, so yes, we believe that breakup of Russia, aiming for breakup of Russia is not neither reasonable nor possible in our situation, just because Buryats are a small minority everywhere they live. But all we can hope for is, first of all, political regime change in Russia, and then we need to contribute to do everything possible to change, like I mentioned, change the imperial mindset or imperial attitude in Russia. I understand that's not easy, but I think this is the only realistic way in the present day situation for us. And also regarding the deliberate ethnic replacement policies, I am often asked this question by journalists. However, I don't know if this is the case, because this topic requires additional research, because we can also suffer from a cognitive bias, because our audience from whom we get information are mostly ethnic Buryats, and there could be a bias regarding the number of casualties or a number of people drafted. But it might be just a side effect of systemic discrimination. But judging by the mobilization, the news about mobilization we get during these few days, it looks like that areas with mostly ethnic Buryat population are hit harder, disproportionately harder than places where the population is mostly ethnic Russian. For instance, in Irkutsk region, people say that a lot more people are drafted from Ustarda autonomous district where Buryats mostly live compared to other parts of the Irkutsk region. But again, as a computational scientist, I can say that this topic requires some further research.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer my part. First of all, I would like to clarify, we are not Nazis. We don't think that there are good nations and bad nations. And we don't blame Buryats as nation in the war crimes which were committed by some Buryats as part of Russian army in Ukraine. Unfortunately, there are Buryats who committed atrocities. There are Tatars who committed atrocities, Russians, and awful to say, there are ethnic Ukrainians, members of Russian army who committed atrocities. There is one example which, I was absolutely destroyed with this example. There is one pilot of Russian Air Force born in Kremenchuk, which is the city in the center of Ukraine, who bombed Kremenchuk, where at this moment lived his mother. He is ethnical Ukrainian, but he is complete bastard, sorry to say this. And that is not about ethnicity. This is about society. This is about Russian society. German society today is great society. Example, they opened the doors of their houses to thousands of Ukrainians, helping them. Absolutely, like Christians, like people with all their heart open. And this German society in 1930s under Hitler was criminal. That is about society. That is not about the nation. And the main criminal is Putin and all his entourage who did this. It's not about nations. But all Russian society is ill. And with all this propaganda, but with some revanchism inside them, he used everything he can. And he did it from them, this monster, which is now so dangerous, first of all to themselves, but also for all planet, the whole planet. So that is not about nations. We don't blame, as Ukrainians, we are not saying that there are like bad nations and somebody, it's not nations who are guilty. It's Russian society and Russian way of organizing their state. But unfortunately, this is not some accident thing, which is copying from generation to generation. This is the way how Russia acts, how Russia lives, how Russian empire exists. That is the fact. We can't say that it is not the fact. This is the fact. And it means that they need de-imperialization. And only after this, they can be normal, sorry to say this, like normal state. Thank you.
If I may, on behalf of the Russian Turkic community, yeah, we're very grateful to all other fellow Turkic communities who are accepting minorities from Russia right now in particular, and for all other help. I just want to answer the bit, how we will be existing in the future. Well, first of all, as Maria said, we are yet to have hard facts and hard evidence about the recruitment. Right now, similarly in Tatarstan and Bashkortostan, we do see that areas, villages with the predominantly Bashkir or Tatar population have very high recruitment numbers, but we don't know the full picture. We know something that people who are not afraid to report it, saying to us. We see some scattered numbers here and there, but the full picture, it might, take years, decades until we really understand what happened. Now, on the point how to move forward with that, and only time will tell, as our colleagues from Ukraine suggest, maybe, we will break up completely, and that will be it. But I do want to point out one thing, when we with this question, how you will be living within Russia, I think, again, it's a very Kremlin-centric question because, and that's what I'm inviting everyone to do, we need to look at the regions. We need to look at the regions and what's happening already right now. For example, in Bashkortostan, we have an incredible, Bashkir National Political Center, activists who have a model for the future of the republic, which is not mono-ethnic, it's a very diverse republic. And they have beautiful model for democratic future and also for Bashkortostani identity. So it's a regional identity. And I want to underline that because we've heard a lot of critics of the Russian decolonization narrative, including in the West, suggesting that, if Russia is to become a very loose confederation, or if to break apart, it will inevitably create, quote, multiple Turkmenistans. Well, that's, first of all, inherently, Islamophobic to say that. But beyond that, I will go back to the 1990s when the Tatar movement for independence was asked that question: what will happen with Russians in Tatarstan? Well, I want people to understand that there are many ethnic Russians living in those republics who also speak the language. And they consider themselves to be Bashkortostanis, Tatarstanis. We all lived in the same republic. Not everyone, all republics, they're like little countries, they're different people, but there are many people like that. And I think that's very important to highlight that on top of this ethnic dimension that we're talking about, there is also a strong regional identity within Russia. People have been incredibly unhappy with how Kremlin treats the regions, no matter their ethnicity. And we have to remember that when we, looking into the future.
Okay, I feel like we've covered a lot here. We have about 8 minutes. It looks like, make that 7 minutes. So maybe one more question that we can do quickly.
Thank you. First, before asking a question, can I please just give a short comment? My name is Bektur Iskender. I'm a journalist from Kyrgyzstan, and I'm one of the founders of a media organization called Klop. And I'm so happy that we finally openly talk about decolonization of Russia, because, previously, not so long time ago, if you ever started a discussion about decolonization of Russia, it was not treated really that seriously, because, Russian Empire and, Russian Federation today is probably one of the, maybe the only, European colonial power that never accepted the fact that it was a colonial power. And I think it's so important right now for scholars from all around the world to revisit the history of our region and to understand how actually we became colonies, to revisit the history of, the brutal suppression of our countries, of our peoples, throughout the last, 500 years or so. Now today, I think we should all be really thankful to Ukraine for being so brave to finally fight against Russia, like on the same level, sort of. Because, previously, whenever Russia would start a war against any of us, Russia would usually win. We would have not enough resources to withstand this. And I'm very happy that Ukraine today is successfully fighting against Russia. We should support Ukraine as much as we can, because Ukraine, I'm pretty much convinced, is fighting for the freedom of all of us, not only for its own freedom. And one of the key, and I've been living in Ukraine for the last couple of years, and I visited it a lot. And I think one of the key reasons why Ukraine is so successful in, fighting against Russian aggression is because of Ukraine's very strong civil society. And that's something that inspired me a lot personally, and I hope it will inspire a lot of other people as well. That when Russia started its full-scale invasion, and I was in Ukraine during those days, and one of the things that that I was really inspired with was how the grassroots logistics of Ukrainian society worked, with how people mobilized into so many groups that efficiently and effectively started basically fighting against Russian soldiers. And I think we should all learn from this. Now, and we should learn also because we, people from Central Asia, from Caucasus, from Eastern Europe, everybody who was affected by Russian colonialism, also, of course, ethnic minorities of Russia, we will all be much stronger if we act together even more, if we learn from each other even more, if there is more post-colonial solidarity, if there is more cooperation between us. So I really urge everybody to develop this. And especially I would really urge everybody not to isolate Central Asia too much. I feel like we are a little bit invisible in this whole discussion, but we are a very important part of this post-colonial history as well. We suffered a lot, we continue suffering up to date, and at the same time, we can bring our experience and expertise as well. And I wish, we do it even more and more and more. And now, finally, the question to everybody. I really needed to say this. What do you think the world should know better about the cause of each of you? What do you think is still heavily underreported and unknown about Tatarstan, Buryatia, and Ukraine, respectively, that you would love, the whole world to understand? Sorry, that's probably a very complicated question, but if you could maybe share, your pain about, something not being covered enough, I would really love to hear you. Thank you.
I'll start as a journalist, that's what I also do, and I try to report on those things. But as I said, very little attention has been paid to the regions until recently. People know very little about it, and it's fascinating. Tatarstan is somewhat known because we had some, pro-independence movement, and that's pretty much where it ends. And the names, I proclaim today, the names of the regional activists who have been staging very successful protests, who have been fighting for regional democracy, which is incredibly important, particularly right now, if we're talking about any decolonization. I want those people, to receive the spotlight they deserve, and be heard, and maybe receive some help. They desperately need it.
So I totally agree with my colleague, and I just wanted to stress that it is very sad that the world is learning about our nation, about us, about our culture under such tragic circumstances that unfortunately my impression is the existence of Buryat nation was mostly acknowledged just because Buryats were disproportionately drafted by Russian government to the invasion of Ukraine and dying there in disproportionately high numbers. And I think this is very wrong, and I just want world to acknowledge that we exist and we have our own unique culture, we have our own scientists, our own journalists, our own political activists, and actually speaking about grassroots organization, Free Buryatia Foundation were the first ethnic anti-war organization founded by Russian citizens. So I think it's also very important, and I just want the world to know about us as a nation, not just in connection with Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you.
I will be short. I think that not many people in the world know that Ukraine, Belarus were the state founders of United Nations and Soviet Union, not Russia. And by the way, the question, what Russia is doing in the United Nations is a very good question. If you will open Charter of United Nations, you will never find them Russia. There is no Russia there. This country never joined United Nations. What they're doing in Security Council, nobody knows. In Security Council should be Soviet Union. There was no process. They were just saying, okay, yesterday was Soviet Union, today we. Like they are doing it all the time, everywhere. So that's what I think is important. And Ukraine and Belarus, we were. We were state founders, and Russia not. So, by the way, I want to address you. We should kick off Russia from United Nations and from Security Council, and they should go the whole procedure which is in the charter, like all countries did, except of one, Russian Federation. Thank you.
My handler has informed me that we are going to have one more question. George?
Thank you. Maybe it's not question, it could be comment. I think we're not very much limited in our expressions here. Thank you very much. It's very interesting discussion. And first of all, my name is George Zaratelli. I'm former president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, so I can imagine how close cooperation I had with Helsinki Commission over the years. And I always know that if I'm going somewhere for conference or gathering organized by Helsinki Commission, it should be a good event, hot topic, and of course good discussion. So thank you very much, having the good speakers here, and especially, of course, I'd like to welcome our friend Alexei for his not only courage, but I mean we are observing every day his activities, colleagues' activities. I think inspiring all of us. Inspiring because I'm not talking about army and people, but I'm talking about the politicians also should be very active and convince us that we all, the united world, will win and will defeat the evil. So I also like to praise your work. I understand it's not easy to be, and it's very difficult to be in civil society in Russia. We think that one day also societies, and it's rightly mentioned, societies in Buryatia or societies in Tatarstan and Bashkiristan, they will change their mind. They will change their mindset, and there will be different activities to, let's say, internally decolonize Russia. But we might wait for that maybe decades or even more in a worst case scenario. But we have now, at this moment, historical moment, when we can, all the let's say democratic world, end with these colonial policies, colonial let's say strategies of Russia. Because if we analyze even last 2 centuries, I'm not going back to digging history, we see that modus operandi of this country, the leadership never changed, never. It could be a people more sophisticated and more nice dresses and with the best watches or something, or villas around the world, but they never gave up the policies conquering, first of all, their neighbors, colonizing the countries which are around them with this paranoid idea to restore empire, to restore Soviet Union. First attempts, they were immediately after collapse of Soviet Union, 90s. We fought first time in other countries, in different countries, but then it's happening also in 2022. And before it was Georgia, you know, Moldova before, then we all warned that if we will not stop Russia now, we will see that colonial wars in other places, and it's going on. It will go on if we will not stop Russia now. All this political theories about the innocence of Russian imperialism, it's gone, it's vanished. We saw what happened in Bucha, we saw what happened in Izium. We are now discovering what happened before Bucha in Abkhazia. And it's a big campaign which started by NGOs, by political parties, also my political parties also part of that, to show to the world what atrocities they committed in Abkhazia, what a scale of genocide happened in our country. And it's not to threaten societies around us, but to give a vivid example what this colonial wars and colonial imperialistic mindset of Putin and his entourage or his surroundings or his group can bring, might bring to the countries. So that's a main, I think, goal of all of us. This theoretical exercises are very good. We could influence societies, we could influence, let's say, perception of the ordinary people. It's very difficult in Russia, I know, because there's a brainwashing wave is so hard, it's so strong that, as we know, many people are supporting Putin's war in Ukraine. But what type of war is that? How the preparation started? We know that Putin many times delivered speeches saying that Ukraine never existed as a state. And it was same, I think, with Kazakhstan. It was always, we had the signs of that war is somewhere very close. But some people and many leaders never believed in that. And now we have this reality, which could bring even worse continuation. It will not stop Russia now. To stop Russia now, we have to support Ukraine. That's a main goal of everybody, I think. So any leader, in any, of course, in a big powers, it's very important. And I have this hope that the mindset and attitude is changed. You mentioned Germany, totally changed now. I was in Germany 2 weeks ago speaking with German leaders, people, and also the ordinary people. They are saying we might be freezing, not literally, but feel a lot of uncomfortable things this winter, but we know why we are doing that, because it should stop now. So I think we have to express a solidarity, first of all, to Ukraine, and to support with all means that we have, because we have to know the cases with Georgia, cases with Moldova, cases with Ukraine, not isolated cases. And all people, they've been mistaken all the time when they saw it somewhere far away. It's never come to my country, it never could come to my family and so on, but it could come. It will not be resolute and decisive. And of course, just to say my final words, that decolonizing Russia, it means to open future perspectives for everybody. So that's a main goal for us. And maybe to form my question, do you agree with me?
Yes.
I have
All
a
right,
short question, if I may.
Oh, were you saying? Okay. Well, we are at time now, so I'm going to wrap up. I just want to say that the Helsinki Commission will not stop talking about this issue. I think the legacy of Russia's empire and its perpetuation, as we've seen, is something we should have been talking about much earlier. And I think that we really need to, start with just educating people about, and I'm learning myself, about the history of Russian colonialism and its effects today that we're seeing in Ukraine as well as in the region. So thank you all for joining, and I think we're setting up for another event in about a half an hour.